Welcome to this special edition of I've Got Issues. I'm Janet Thompson-Jackson. On this Your Voice, Your Vote IGI election special, we provide you with an opportunity through one-on-one interviews to get to know the candidates for Kansas governor. Libertarian candidate Keen Umbehr, Democratic candidate Paul Davis, and Republican candidate and incumbent Sam Brownback. First, we start with Libertarian candidate Keen Umbehr. Welcome to IGI, Mr. Umbehr.
Well, thank you, Jan. I'm pleased to be here.
What most qualifies you to be the next governor of Kansas?
The qualifications for governor, anybody can run for governor. I think it helps if you've been involved in some politics, if you have a basic understanding of the Constitution, of both the state Constitution and the federal Constitution. You don't, of course, have to be a lawyer. In this case, myself and Mr. Brownback and Mr. Davis, we're all lawyers, so it's unique in that regard. But it does provide a basis to know how the system works, why it's supposed to go certain ways. And so, but, you know, I've had a little experience. I've been a city councilman, I've been a school board member, I've been on the Rural Water District Board. Of course, I've been a Rotarian, and I've been a businessman. And so I think that are great experiences that draws from a wide range of common people's experiences that basically that's everybody in the state.
Okay. The credit rating of the state of Kansas has recently been downgraded by the two credit rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's. I'm going to ask you a three-part question.
Okay.
Why did that happen? How significant is it? And what would you do to restore the credit rating?
Well, the basic reason why at least Moody's downgrade our credit is our expenses are exceeding our revenue. And whenever a credit rating board looks at that situation, it does concern them because we have bonds out and it determines whether or not we're going to be able to pay our bonds. In their opinion, they decided that that situation isn't going to correct itself, and so they downgraded our credit rating, which causes us as a state to pay a higher interest rate on the bonds we have out. It's a serious thing, but you know, I think that they're accurately assessing our rate of expenditures versus our rate of revenue that we have coming in, and there's an imbalance. Our expenditures are exceeding the revenue, the projected revenue we have coming in. So it projects we're going to have a budget problem by the June of 2015 that nobody really wants to talk about.
What would you do as governor to improve that?
Well, it's a governor's tax plan that has caused the issue. 191,000 of us, this was Mr. Brownback's tax plan that was passed by the legislature, and he signed into law. 191,000 of us business owners, we get to pay zero income tax on our wages and profits. So I'm a lawyer, I run a law firm, I pay zero income tax on the wages and the profit for my law firm. But if you're one of the 1.3 million wage earners in Kansas, you have to pay all the taxes on wages, and there's no plans on changing it. And so we took off the revenue, incoming revenue for what the business owners paid, and that was about $700 million. And we didn't make corresponding cuts to the budget to equalize spending and revenue. So if I can quickly show you a little graph here.
Okay.
This is our graph showing 191,000 of us not paying income tax and 1.3 million wage earners paying all the income tax. And the question, is this fair? Of course it's not fair. 1.3 million wage earners know it's not fair. And this is a way to describe what the tax plan is in a single, poster. So, you know, to change the situation is we have to pass the Kansas Fair Tax. The Kansas Fair Tax is HB 2625. It was introduced into the House by 34 senators, or House members. It did not get a hearing, which is quite strange because usually when you have that many House members sponsoring a piece of legislation, it always gets hearing. But basically, the legislation repeals income tax for everyone, sales tax, corporation tax, financial institution tax, some compensating use tax, and in its place institutes a 5.7% consumption tax on goods and services. It broadens out the tax base. It will produce more revenue than we give up when we zero out the income tax. But most importantly, it will be fair. It will be fair to every person in Kansas. The libertarian principle, and it's not libertarian, I think we all have this principle, is all laws have to apply equally to everyone all the time. This tax plan doesn't. It's put our state in financial trouble. In January, whoever is the governor, we have a serious budget problem that's facing Kansas, and there's going to be very limited options that are going to be able to be taken in 6 months' time to wind up June 30th with we're supposed to have 7.5, but I think that's going to be pushed by the wayside.
Okay.
We just need to have all our bills paid.
All right. Earlier this year, the Kansas Supreme Court determined that the reductions in school funding for public education, that those reductions were unconstitutional, and ordered the legislature to fix it, which they did. The measures passed this summer. Do you believe that the remedies that from the legislature are sufficient?
Well, they were probably sufficient in as much as until it got over to Mr. Brownback's desk, and he signed them into law, and then infused the CAPERS payments that they were paying as part of the school district finance that was supposed to go to the district. So the districts aren't getting the money that the Supreme Court said they have to pay. But, in addition, that legislation was bundled with a denial of due process for teachers, several other portions of that. And our Kansas Constitution, Section 2, Article 16, or maybe I got Article 2, Section 16, specifically prohibits the bundling of bills. So when the governor signed it, he signed something that's unconstitutional. I think the KNEA has actually filed suit against that, and they're asking the court to determine the constitutionality of that piece of legislation as signed by the governor. So, but the bigger issue is school district finance. Are they getting enough? And they're not getting enough. And, if the legislature has one overriding duty, it's to fairly fund schools. And we can do that a lot of different ways, but there's 286 school districts in Kansas. Irregardless of what money is appropriated for each school district, it's the school district themselves that decide how much they're going to pay teachers and how much money is going to go in the classroom. And so, right now the school district finance formula has about $4,400 in it per student, but that doesn't mean it's all going to students. It's just going into their funding for each district, and the board members, and I support this decision, they decide how that money is being spent. So,
well, what needs to be done to further improve the quality of education for Kansas students?
Our public school teachers do a great job, but there are a certain slice of students that aren't served well by the public school system, and so we have to widen school choice. There's almost $13,000 when you add our state aid and our federal aid to our per student formula, and that money should follow the students. And because we want every student to thrive, but some students don't thrive in the traditional public school setting. All 4 of my sons went to public schools. They did fantastic, but we need to open it up so that money follows the student, not the building. So whether it's parochial school or home school or military school, another public school, we have to allow that student choice in there. And we have to allow, require some efficiencies when we give money to the school districts. They just can't spend it any way they want. And we see some outrageous school expenditures. For example, 259 hires 107 social workers. I think it's 64 child psychologists. That's the decision that board made. But that's also a decision that says once we pay all those salaries, it's not going into teacher salaries. Teachers teach students, and I think that ought to be the priority.
Okay. You've been traveling around the state. What do you think, what's your assessment of the economy in Kansas right now?
It is stagnant and trending downward. The sun is not shining in Kansas if you're a wage earner. Wage earners are continuing to pay state income tax on their wages, and that is such an insidious plan. It's discriminatory. I doubt it'll even comply with the 14th Amendment. It doesn't treat all Kansans equally, and that's what we got to have. If we gave all the wage earners, the 1.3 million wage earners in Kansas, the same zero income tax that we business owners enjoy, that amounts to $2.5 billion. When that $2.5 billion is put into their pockets, twice a month, throughout the year, that's going to put more disposable income into that stratosphere of society that will go out and spend it.
So you would propose or support the same tax cuts that businesses are going to get for individuals?
Absolutely. The legislature did it for us business owners in one legislative session. They can do it for the wage earner in one legislative session.
What other policies do you think are necessary to support and strengthen the Kansas economy and boost jobs?
Boost jobs. Well, when wage earners have more money in their pocket, they're going to go out and spend. Let's take a restaurant, for example. When he sees there's people lined up at his restaurant because his demand has increased, he's going to go out and hire more cooks, more waitresses. The tire store is going to hire more techs. The computer store is going to hire more salesmen. That's called trickle-up capitalism. It works. Trickle-down doesn't work. It's never worked. It's worked good for if you're on the top, but that's not where a bulk of our Kansas citizens are. Most Kansas citizens are wage earners, and they deserve a tax plan that is equal and fair to all. And when they do that, with more disposable income at the wage earner level, that's what's going to create jobs.
Okay. Let's switch to health care. Kansas is one of 20 states that chose not to accept the funds to expand Medicare. What do you think is the impact of that decision?
Well, the impact was we have people that, for one reason or another, have been excluded from health care. But I do support the governor's decision in that regard. Obamacare, as is commonly known, is a faulted plan. It's economically faulted. We can do better. In terms of CanCare, we spend $3 billion a year to provide health care for 400,000 people. But there's a better way. My Lieutenant Governor, Dr. Josh Umbehr, who's my son, runs a clinic down in Wichita. It's called Direct Primary Care. And we have to separate health care from health insurance. You don't buy auto insurance and expect to have gas, oil, and tires paid for it. But when we get to the health care model, we kind of lose our mind and we think that's a great plan. But his clinic down in Wichita does not take insurance, $50 a month for most adults, $10 for kids. When you leave the clinic, well, there's no copay, no deductible, unlimited visits. When you leave the clinic, you leave with your prescription in your hand at 5% over wholesale. That is a system. If we gave every person in CanCare a $50 membership per month, it would be $276 million out of a $3 billion program. And then they could have an health insurance policy wrapped around that. They'll get great health care whenever they need it. The doctors, every doctor in Kansas would accept a model like that because they're guaranteed payment. They're not billing. They're not getting denied. The clients, the enrollees like it because they can go to the doctor whenever they need to. 95% of the reason you go to doctors is just the normal clinic stuff. So we have to have a model, a direct primary care model that allows doctors to make money, because it's a business too, and provide health care for the citizens that need it when they need it, and then a health care policy for all the unexpected stuff.
Is there anything that you think that the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare has done well, or would you try to get it repealed?
Well, it's not going to be repealed. We've elected Republicans, we've elected Democrats. We just change the person holding the whip. And when Republicans get in power, if that's what it turns out to be, they're not going to repeal Obamacare. They're going to try to amend it because they want to be the ones handing out health care. The ACA does allow for this type of model, the direct primary care model. Kansas passed Mandate Light. So our state can offer, and this sounds oxymoronic, non-qualified health insurance policies. We don't have to include everything that the ACA requires us to carry. Well, that's great for the state, and we need to use that model, and it is part of the law, and so we can do different things, Kansas, because we passed that Mandate Light. So, and that was part of the ACA. If states pass Mandate Light, then they can do several things, and so that's one thing they did well.
And you know what, I'm going to move on to the environment right now, so we have time for a few more questions. What are the most significant environmental challenges that you think are facing Kansas right now?
Well, we have a western water issue out in western Kansas, and the question was posed to me what I do about it. Well, right now, nothing. And that sounds
Why is that?
Crazy. It's a 5-state solution. It's Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Texas. We're all pulling out of the same aquifer. We shouldn't do anything that would damage our Kansas agricultural economy out there unless the other 4 states are going to join with us. I don't support the idea that we got to start amassing money by taxing property to put in a pool of funds for a plan that hasn't been developed. You know, whenever you have a pool of funds without a developed plan, that's where mischief occurs. Come up with a plan, let's debate the plan, and then let's see about funding mechanism for that plan.
Okay. What about what about fracking?
Fracking. You know, full disclosure here, my family's been worked for oil companies all life. My brother works for BJ Hughes. He sells fracking jobs. The fracking technology, they've been doing it since the 1900s in Kansas, and the technology has increased, and the safety things that they've done in terms of fracking has increased. And there's as much misinformation out there about fracking as there is about the environmental damage
but
fracking has caused. I do support it, and the technology is getting better.
Okay.
And so,
in the last 2 minutes that we have, or 1 minute, what are your top priorities? What would your top priorities be as governor of Kansas?
The top priorities, we have to fix this tax plan first. In 2015, I'm going to set the priority for the legislature. You pass this, equalize this tax plan first. You fix this first. And they're not going to, the legislature's not going to say, oh, Umbehr, you're so right. You know, we were so misguided when we passed the governor's tax plan. Sure, we'll pass the Kansas Fair Tax. They're not going to do that. So I have vowed to veto every piece of legislation until they fix this first. It'll take them all 90 days to do it. And it is so important that we don't have two classes of citizens in the state of Kansas. We have one class. We're all treated equally. All laws have to apply equally to everyone all the time, including this tax plan. So I won't go forward with any other piece of legislation until they fix this first.
Okay, tell me one more top priority other than the budget.
Other than the budget, school finance. We have 3 programs that allow companies that move into Kansas to pay zero income tax, or zero property tax, excuse me. Probably income tax too, on their footprint. We have towers, wind turbines out in western Kansas have a lifetime tax abatement. No company should not pay school district property tax. They want to have an educated workforce come in. They have to pay the cost of educating that next generation of workforce. So I am for a law that repeals every single property tax abatement for school district property tax. Every business, every property has to pay school district property tax. We wouldn't have a shortage of money at that point.
Okay. Mr. Umbehr, thank you very much for being with us on IGI.
Well, thank you, Janet. I'm very pleased to be here.
Stay with us. Coming up next, we feature Democratic candidate Paul Davis.
My name is Keen Umbehr. I'm the Libertarian candidate for governor. As long as a single student is failing, I find that unacceptable. And we have to provide each student with the educational setting where they can graduate from high school. We have to allow the funding to follow the student, not the building. While the public school system does a great job in the vast majority of cases, we're not satisfied until every student in Kansas can graduate from high school. My name is Keen Umbehr. I want to be your governor. I hope to earn your trust and your vote. Thank you.
In one-room schoolhouses just like this, our Kansas tradition of strong public schools began. I'm Paul Davis. My parents were teachers, and I know Kansas can do better than Governor Brownback's largest single cut to school funding in state history. For our daughter's sake, for your kids and grandkids, we have to restore those cuts, because education means economic opportunity, and I won't allow strong Kansas schools to become a thing of the past.
We now welcome Democratic candidate for Kansas Governor, Paul Davis. Mr. Davis, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be with you. Thank you.
Tell us what most qualifies you to be the next governor of Kansas.
Well, I've spent 12 years in the legislature being able to bring Democrats and Republicans together. I've built many bipartisan coalitions. It's one of the reasons why we've got over 180 current and former Republican elected officials that have endorsed my campaign. It's never happened in Kansas before. So I can be able to reunite people, and I think that's what it's going to take in order to confront the challenges that we've got as Kansans. I also am going to make education my very top priority. It's always been my top priority in the legislature, and I believe the most important thing that we can do as a state is to restore the cuts that have been made to our public schools. And we also need to get our economy performing performing much better than it is. We are below the national average right now, and we are trailing our surrounding states in virtually every economic growth indicator. And we need to return to that proven model that we have used for many decades here in Kansas to be able to get our economy above the national average so we can really move the state forward.
Okay. The state of Kansas bond rating has been lowered by the two credit agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's. Three-part question. Why did that happen? How significant is it that that happened? And what would you do to restore the rating?
Well, it's very significant. We've had 3 credit downgradings in just over a year. And when you look at trying to move your economy forward, you look at trying to create an environment where you want people to come locate their businesses in Kansas, this has a very adverse effect on us. The reason this is happening is because the governor's economic experiment is pouring the state deep, deep into debt.
And you're talking about the income tax?
I'm talking about the income tax cuts. $1.3 billion in debt is where the state will be over the next 5 years. That comes from our nonpartisan legislative research department. And these bond rating agencies look very carefully at your fiscal future, and do you have a plan to deal with that? And what they're seeing right now is the fact that there is no plan. Governor Brownback, if you ask him what he's going to do about the $1.3 billion deficit over the next 5 years, he just says it's not going to happen, and that's why we're in that situation. So what we've got to do to get out of it is we need to end this economic experiment that just isn't working and is not going to work. And I've proposed that we freeze the income tax rates where they're going to be on January 1, 2015, get our fiscal house in order, balance our budget, and let's begin restoring the cuts that have been made to public schools.
Okay. Speaking of schools, the legislature has now fixed, at least they have passed legislation that will restore funding to public schools. Are those measures enough? Is that headed in the right direction? Do you think that that's compliant with what the court said needed to happen?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't be in a position where we have a court have to tell us that we need to fund our public schools. I mean, I happen to believe that we've got a moral obligation to provide the children of Kansas with the very best public schools possible. And we're in this situation because Governor Brownback made the largest single cut to public school funding in state history in his first year in office, and he has just never prioritized education. And we now have a school finance lawsuit that part of that lawsuit has been satisfied, but the major part of it is still pending, and we're going to have to see what happens with that. But frankly, as I said, we shouldn't have a court have to tell us that we need to properly fund our public schools.
What else do we need to do to continue to improve the quality of education in our public schools?
Well, I think one of the great opportunities that we have now with so much technology that is available is we can expand course offerings all across the state by utilizing distance learning. In Greensburg, after the tornado, they rebuilt the school and they installed some great technology, and they're teaching classes in many different school districts across southwest Kansas right now. So I think that's a wonderful opportunity that we have. But I think perhaps more important than that, we've got to support our public school teachers. Our public school teachers just don't feel valued, and when Governor Brownback signed a bill to do away with their due process rights, they've just felt like they have constantly been just kicked over and over again by the folks in Topeka. A good public school teacher is the very most significant factor in a child's education, and we've got to stand behind our teachers, make sure that we're retaining the great teachers that we have, and we're recruiting the very best people to come into the teaching profession.
As you've traveled around the state, what do you see as the state of the Kansas economy right now? How would you assess that? I
think it's stagnant. That's really where we're at. As I've said, we're trailing the rest of the country and we're trailing our surrounding states in virtually every economic growth indicator there is out there. And it's indicative of a one-size-fits-all approach that Governor Brownback has taken to growing the economy. It basically says, you know, let's give income tax cuts primarily to the top income earners, and let's hope that we're going to create jobs as a result of that. And it's just not working, and it's not going to work. Kauffman Foundation recently found that we were 45th in the country in terms of new business creation. So we've got to do a lot better than that. And we have to, I think, return to that proven Kansas model. And what it really relies upon is the fact that communities are the leaders in economic development, and the state needs to be a partner with communities. And we have to understand that, you know, what works here in Topeka is very different than what works in Garden City, and we need to understand the unique needs of communities and help them grow their economies. We also, though, have to provide the basics, and that means great public schools, a highly skilled and trained workforce, and we have a lot more we need to do in terms of career and technical education, great universities, and infrastructure. Governor Brownback has taken $1 billion out of our transportation fund, and we can't continue to do that if we're going to want to grow as a state.
What specifically would you do to boost job growth?
Well, what I think we have to do is send a signal that the economic environment here in Kansas is going to be very different in the future than it has been right now. People are not going to want to invest in a state when you've seen 3 credit downgradings, and they see an economic experiment that, frankly, is getting a lot of attention across the country, and it's not good attention. It's bad attention, and that is not going to help us grow the state. But we got to return to the basics. As I said, great public schools, investing in infrastructure. We have a transportation plan that I was very involved in getting through the legislature back in 2010. 3 different economic studies showed that plan would create 175,000 jobs over the 10-year life of the plan. Probably the largest job creation program the legislature has ever created. But when you're taking $1 billion out of a proven job creating program to subsidize an economic experiment that's just not working, it really defies common sense. So many people live in Kansas because of the quality of life, and I think the single most factor in that great quality of life that we have are the great public schools. I'm a product of the public schools here. My wife and I have a 4-year-old who's going to walk into a public school for the very first time, and we want to make sure that she's going to have the kind of opportunities that I had when I was growing up here.
Let's shift to health care. Kansas is one of 20 states that's chosen not to accept federal funds to expand Medicare. What do you think is the impact of that decision?
Well, the impact is a lot of our healthcare providers are very, very worried about the future. I've spent a lot of time listening to hospital administrators, nursing home administrators, home health agencies, physicians, and uniformly they are saying this is something that we need. Many rural hospital administrators are really worried about whether they're going to be able to keep their doors open if we don't move forward with this. And we cannot get into a situation where we have parts of our state that don't have access to a good hospital. It will be devastating to many rural communities around the state. So we can inject over $3 billion into the Kansas economy. We can create a lot of jobs that, frankly, we desperately need. And not to mention the fact we can help over 150,000 Kansans that don't have health insurance. So,
well, how do we do that? What needs to be done so that people have more access, so more people have access to health care?
Well, we need to have a governor who is going to not play politics with this issue and is going to do what I think is right for the people of Kansas. And Governor Brownback has repeatedly said that he's not going to move forward on this issue. You've got a lot of Republican governors out there who say, you know what, I don't like the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, but I know that Medicaid expansion is going to help my state, and that's why I'm going to do it. The governor's campaigning with Chris Christie from New Jersey the other day. Chris Christie has said this is the best thing to do for New Jersey, and I'm going to say yes to it.
Okay. What do you think is the most significant, or most, more than one, it may be significant, environmental challenge in Kansas, it's facing Kansas right now?
Well, I think the most significant long-term issue that the state has, and when I say long-term, it doesn't mean you can push it off into the future, because we have to deal with it right away, is the water issue. The Ogallala Aquifer, which has supplied water to a good part of the state, is depleting, and it's rapidly depleting. And if we don't do something about that, it is going to have a devastating effect on the economy in western Kansas, on agriculture, on the cattle and ranching community that we have there. And so we have to address this issue. It's a complex issue, and the state's role, I think, is to be a facilitator of the discussion. We can't ram a solution down people's throats. We've got to help the stakeholders have meaningful conversations about things like conservation, and look at whether we can find other sources of water. But it is an absolutely critical issue, not just for western Kansas, but for the whole state.
Okay, so we have water. Any other environmental issues that you're looking at?
Well, I think one of the big energy issues that we have is expanding our wind economy. We are one of the windiest states in the country. It's not just the politicians, but we have an enormous capacity to generate wind energy. And one of the things that is key to that is our renewable portfolio standard that says we are going to produce a certain amount of energy from renewable sources. And the wind industry only wants to do business in states that have this. But there are efforts at the legislature to get rid of our renewable portfolio standard. If we did this, we would be the only state in the country to enact a renewable portfolio standard and then get rid of it. And I am very committed to making sure that we continue to have our renewable portfolio standard. Unfortunately, Governor Brownback, his position has changed about as much as the direction of the wind does on a windy day in Kansas. And he now is saying that he would support repealing the renewable portfolio standard. And that will be devastating to our ability to grow the wind economy in Kansas.
What needs to be done to ensure safe fracking in Kansas?
Well, fracking has been going on for many years here, but we now have the advent of horizontal fracking, and it has certainly generated a lot of discussion, not just in Kansas, but all around the country.
Nationwide, yeah.
And I've spent a lot of time, talking to landowners, talking to the companies that are doing this, and talking to environmental groups who have concerns about this. And I do believe that those who are experimenting with horizontal fracking are trying to do that in a very responsible manner.
And could you explain horizontal fracking for those who may not be familiar?
Sure. Well, I wish I had a diagram here, but it's basically when you are drilling down, thousands of feet into the earth, and then you have the ability to drill in a horizontal manner, and you can do so for miles. It's amazing technology, but I do believe that people are trying to do this in a responsible manner. But government certainly has a role to play in overseeing this, and there are a lot of concerns out there, and I think that this is something that we're going to have to watch very carefully.
But you think that fracking is good for Kansas? Well,
it's been around for a long time. I think it's something that can be done in a responsible way, but we just have to be very careful about it, and we've got to be watching this as it's evolving very closely.
Okay. We have a few minutes left. I'd like to hear what your top priorities would be if you were elected governor.
Yeah. Well, my very top priority is going to be to restore the cuts that have been made to public education. I just believe that we cannot move forward as a state. We cannot make Kansas a place where we are getting more people who are moving into our state instead of moving out unless we have the very best public schools. This is a state that has a great tradition of public education, and I'm a product of that. But I think Kansans are worried about their public schools more so than I've ever seen them, and they've seen the larger class sizes, they've seen the test scores go down, they've seen the school closings, and they're very concerned, and we need to have somebody in the governor's office who is absolutely committed to restoring those cuts to public schools. The other thing that we have to do is we've got to get our economy performing much better than we are right now. We are just not in a place where we're going to be able to grow as a state when you're trailing your surrounding states in virtually every economic growth indicator there is out there. And I think it's just signifies a failed economic strategy, an ideologically driven strategy that just isn't working and is not going to work.
Okay. We have time for one more priority.
Well, I think in order to get all these things done, we've got to be able to work together as Democrats and Republicans. We've got to be able to have a spirit of bipartisan cooperation. Governor Brownback hasn't been able to work with Democrats, and he hasn't been able to work with a lot of Republicans. I've got over 180 current and former Republican elected officials that have said, we're not going to support the Republican candidate, we're going to support the Democratic candidate because I've got a history of being able to unite people, and that's what it's going to take if we're going to meet the challenges that Kansas has.
Mr. Davis, thank you so much for joining us on IGI.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Coming up next, we speak with the Republican candidate for Kansas governor, the incumbent Sam Brownback.
Well, I was raised on a farm in eastern Kansas. My dad and mom still operate it. I go out and help once in a while, but Dad doesn't let me plant or drive the combine because I'm not old enough. But the values and the character that they gave me in that hard work on that family farm is just amazing. And we've got people moving back to rural Kansas. That's just music to my ears because that means families are coming in.
Sam Brownback, Kansas.
Now we have the Republican candidate for Kansas governor, our current governor, Sam Brownback. Welcome to IGI, Governor.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to join you. And what a beautiful set and setting. Thank you guys for putting this together.
Thank you. Let's start with, why should the voters of Kansas re-elect you to a second term?
Because we got things moving in the right way. We had to make a number of difficult choices and changes. But when I came in, the CAPER system was in bankruptcy. We weren't creating jobs. We had seen all these difficulties with Medicaid. We were making half payments to schools. And now we're at a record number of people working in the state of Kansas, 4.8% unemployment rate. We've got record spending in K-12. We've got our CAPER system out of the bankruptcy zone and about middle ranking around the country. We've got things moving in the right direction. So we've made the tough, difficult choices, but we're in a position now of growing and growth, and it's good to be us. And what I'd like to do is to continue that on forward for another 4 years instead of changing directions, going back really to the old systems of where our CAPER system's underfunded and our taxes are higher and we're not investing in places that we should.
Okay, well, we're going to get to some of those issues in just a moment. But as you know, the bond rating in Kansas has been lowered by the two credit rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's. I'm going to ask you a three-part question. Why did that happen? What is the significance of that? And what are you going to do, or what will you do to fix that?
Well, our CAPER's problems caught up with us. When you have a pension system in the bankruptcy zone, the bond rating agencies don't like it. And we've had to put more money into the CAPER's system. And putting more money in the CAPER system puts us at an imbalance on our overall payments. But now we're out of the bankruptcy zone. They've taken us from a AA plus to a AA rating, one notch down. And now we're in a good position to grow. And I think us moving forward on that track is the right way for us to do it. When you get the growth moving forward, like I say, record amount of employment in the state of Kansas. And the other thing is, you got to look at where we were in the finances for our state. 4 years ago, we had less than $1,000 cash on hand at the end of the fiscal year in July of 2010. We ended this last fiscal year, $434 million cash on hand. Now, the tax change that we did is a significant one. And we projected that for 2 years you would have a dip before it goes back up, and we're seeing that. But we banked money to put it in. That's the $434 million. Last year we had 700-some million to move us through that, and so that we could get growth happening. And that's the job growth that you can build on. The problem for us is, in the past, we were a high-tax state in the middle of the country, and people were leaving. We had out-migration to every neighboring state. We now are the second lowest income tax state in the region. Colorado's still lower. And we've got people moving in from every surrounding state but Colorado. And we've got wealth transfer from Missouri into Kansas. And the Kansas side of Kansas City is growing 3 times faster than the Missouri side, even with the Royals on the Missouri side. We're growing 3 times faster in private sector jobs. So our trajectory is right, but the transition is difficult. These things are hard to get done.
So keep on doing what you're doing. The policies would be the same.
It's working.
Okay.
You got to move it on forward. I talked to Bill Richardson last week. He's the former New Mexico governor. Their income tax rates, from what he was telling me, were at 9%, and he took them down to 3%. And they got growth. But your transition is difficult. We went to zero taxes on small business. We did that to create a growth environment for small business. And you're seeing record numbers of small businesses in this state. So the challenge is the transition, but we've done it.
Governor, we're going to move on to education. As you know, the Kansas Supreme Court determined earlier that the funding for public education in Kansas, the formula was unconstitutional and required the legislature to come up with a fix, which they've done. What do you think of those remedies? Do you think that we're now on the right track to be compliant with the Supreme Court?
I do. The prior administration, the Parkinson administration, made major changes in public education in the state and in the fall off of the recession from 08 to 10 time period. So they cut a bunch of funding to K-12 education, and in that, then they also disequalized the formula. By that I mean that the Johnson County schools were getting more spending per pupil than, say, Topeka or Wichita. We equalized it. We put $130 million more back into the mostly equalization. A lot of it went to property tax relief, too, for those urban districts, say, in Wichita and Topeka in particular. And the court has ruled now that the equalization is taken care of. The next step will be the adequacy piece of it. And that's the one that we will need to continue to work on. So say we're at record funding on K-12, and we're going to continue to invest in K-12 education. One of the changes the legislature made was to remove the mandate on statewide tenure for teachers. And that certainly upset a number of people in the teachers union. I understand that. But it made it a local issue. So I was just talking on a radio call today with Fort Scott, a gentleman doing a talk show there, and Fort Scott put in a local tenure issue. So it puts that as a local decision-making process, which I think is a better place for it to be decided. But it obviously upset a number of people. But that moved through the legislature along with the funding, and I think we're on a much better track now, fixing the one piece, and then now we've got to get on the adequacy one.
What else needs to be done to continue to improve the state of public education? I
think we've got to continue to invest in targeted areas in particular. Our reading scores at 4th grade are good, but when you break it out and you look at children in special categories or in low-income categories, it's not so good. So we've taken and actually have even transitioned some welfare funds into reading programs for those students that are behind. And that's working. So we're getting those kids caught up in reading. I think we need to do more on technical education and making sure that when our students graduate from high school, they are ready to go to college, not needing remedial courses, or they're ready to go in the workforce, that they've got a technical certification as a CNA or IT or welding or diesel mechanic. So we've invested heavily there. State pays for 100% of technical education now, and we've seen record growth in that. The Washburn Tech has done a fabulous job in its expansion of that. And you're giving kids now, as they come out of high school, they've got a degree and I've got a skill. And so now I can use that skill to help work my way on through college and not get as much student debt, which is the fastest growing debt in the country.
Yeah. Speaking of jobs, we're kind of transitioning to jobs here. I know you've continued to travel around the state. First, give me your assessment of the economy right now and what can be done to continue to boost job production in Kansas.
The economy's good in Kansas, but there are some spots that aren't as good as others. The general aviation, the sale of small business aircraft, is still been hurt from the recession and, frankly, too, from the president's belittling of business aviation. The agriculture sector has been strong. Grain prices are weaker now. Cattle are doing well. Ethanol is doing well. The service sector is doing very well in our state, particularly in the Kansas City area. As I mentioned earlier, we're growing rapidly in that Kansas City market. Kansas City will be a Kansas City by definition of private sector jobs in a little over a decade, 11 years, because our growth is so much faster on this side. We've got excellent growth taking place in Manhattan, Lawrence has been doing well, Southwest Kansas, Garden City, Dodge City. I think our real issue areas that we've struggled with has been Wichita and Southeast Kansas. And it's been general aviation in particular in Wichita. We've got an innovation campus going in there to try to expand aviation jobs. And in Southeast Kansas, I think we've just got to really start ginning things up, particularly around small business. Because you bring big business into an area, you pay for them, and they come, but then they'll change their business model and leave.
Are there any specific initiatives you're thinking about to boost small business?
Well, two of them, and one we've gotten done. The first one was to take the tax off of small business. So that small business pass-through tax, took it off, and I've had a number of small business people saying, thank you, I use that to buy a piece of equipment, to hire 2 more people, and we're expanding. Or Patty Bossert here in Topeka used that money to expand her temp agency into Manhattan, creating more jobs and more opportunities. And small business is what you want to grow because that's where most Kansans work. 3/4 of Kansans work for themselves or in a business with 10 or fewer employees. The second piece is we need to make the regulatory environment simpler and easier to get into. So I want to get a one-stop shop to where you can register with the state of Kansas if you're a small business, 24/7 over the internet. You type in all the data, push send, you're registered. And it goes to then all the state, and I'd like to eventually local agencies. Now then they send the inspectors to inspect for this or that, whatever it may take. But we need to make the regulatory environment simpler and more predictable for small business because they're the ones that can't afford the lawyers and the accountants to get them into it. You need big business for big government, but I want it to be easy for small business to start and sustain in Kansas.
Well, there's, of course, been some controversy over the tax cuts, the income tax cuts for small businesses and the inequity between that and individuals and the rest of the state. How are you responding to the criticism?
Well, we cut income taxes for everybody. Everybody's rates went down. Top rate started at 6.45, it's now at 4.8. Bottom rate went down as well. We went from 3 rates to 2 rates. And the whole objective on taking the taxes off of small business is in all our economic modeling that created the most jobs. And what we were after in our tax changes was to create jobs. So this is creating jobs. And then in the future, as the government revenue grows more than 2% over last year, we can use that revenue over that amount to cut back the rest of the income taxes and keep whittling that down. The key was you had to get growth. You got to grow to move this on forward. 9 states don't have an income tax. They tend to be the fastest growing ones in the country. We had a way too high income tax rate, and we were losing people. We were losing a lot of economic activity to Texas. I like beating Texans. I don't like losing to them. And so what we're trying to do is get in a better position, and so far it's working. We've got everybody's income tax rates down, and we're going to continue to work those down with growth.
Okay. Let's shift to health care. You made the decision as one of 19 other states to not accept funding to expand Medicaid. Was that the right decision? Would you do it again? Where are you on that now?
I would. That was a billion-dollar price tag that we didn't have the money to do. The expansion of Obamacare. This is Obamacare into the Medicaid system.
Sure.
And on top of that, we have a problem in the state of Kansas taking care of people currently that are on Medicaid. And these are people that have disabilities or dependents. That's who we have on Medicaid now. The expansion went to able-bodied individuals without dependents. Prior administration created a waiting list. They said, if you're Medicaid qualified in Kansas, you have a disability or a dependent, we'll put you on, but we're not going to provide you all the services. We're going to put you on a waiting list for these extended services. And so our target has been to get that waiting list down.
Has that been working?
It has been. We've gotten a number of people. We put about $50 million more into buying those waiting list downs on the expanded services. And I'd rather take care of that group of individuals rather than able-bodied individuals without dependents that would cost us another $1 billion. I think we ought to take care of the ones that we currently have.
Have you seen any impact from that decision that is a negative one that you feel needs to be corrected?
You always have impacts back and forth. I think Obamacare is the wrong way to go. It took money from Medicare, which we're a big Medicare state. Generally, that's for senior citizens, and put money into an expanded program that has not been implemented now. for as far as overall Obamacare. And we don't have the resources to do the Medicaid match. Now, my opponent supports expanded Medicaid. I have no earthly idea where he thinks the $1 billion is going to come from, or how he's going to get the waiting list taken care of for people currently on Medicaid. And he hasn't been willing to explain that.
Okay. Let's go to the environment. What do you think are the most significant environmental challenges that Kansas is facing today?
Water.
Okay.
I think just, if you look at it, there's a number of challenges. But for us, as I look out 50 years for the state of Kansas, I think our big challenges is making sure we have adequate water supplies in the east on our reservoirs, some of which are silting in the west over the Ogallala, where we've used some 30% of that resource.
How do we do that?
We've got a big vision process going on right now, where we've had over 100 meetings of people and saying, what do we need to do to secure our water resources? We're starting our first dredging project at John Redmond Reservoir near Burlington, because we're going to need to dredge and stop the siltation in some of these reservoirs here. And then I think we've got to have a big discussion in the western part of the state on the use of the Ogallala. We've got some people going into local intensive management areas where they're binding each other together and reducing their pull on the aquifer. But this is a major issue for us. I've worked on water issues a long time. My opponent has not, and he's not addressed these issues in the past, and this is really the big one staring at us.
Okay. What about fracking? I want to just touch on that for a moment and see where you see fracking going in Kansas.
Fracking started in Kansas.
Yes, I understand that.
A number of years ago, and I see it continuing in the state. Where I think we have to watch is the reintroduction of salt water, because a lot of the horizontal fracking will produce large quantities of brine water or salt water. And the reintroduction of that is where some of the experts are saying that's what's causing some of your environmental problems in certain formations. I think we've got to be very particular about that. And we've got a task force that's met, produced a study on this. We've had that group go into action already on Harper County, where we've had some issues there that people were looking at. We had a couple earthquakes in the area, and I think this is an important issue for us to be on top of the science and address those issues, particularly, as I say, that saltwater reintroduction after use of the well.
Okay. We have just 2 minutes left. I'd like you to spend that time talking about what your top priorities would be if reelected.
Growing the economy, investing in education, and making it such that it really works for our students, so when they graduate from high school, they are ready to go to college without remediation, or they're ready to go in the workforce because they have a technical skill. Water, poverty. Our poverty programs in this country have not worked, because our poverty rate's roughly the same as it was when the Great Society started. So I want to see us be much more individualized in working with people to get them out of poverty, and that our objective isn't to just give a pittance of money, but it's actually to get somebody out of poverty. So those would be key things that I want to work on, because we've got to create jobs and get a growing economy to attract people. We've got to invest in education so we train our young people well. We've got to have water for our future. And then I just think poverty is one of those key areas that we've got a great opportunity to change a paradigm and make it work for the people to get them out of poverty, not keep them in it.
Okay. Governor, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for being on IGI.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for this discussion. If you have any questions or comments, send an email to issues@ktwu.org or write to us at the address on your screen. For I've Got Issues, in this Your Voice, Your Vote election special, I'm Janet Thompson-Jackson. Thanks for being with us.